the executive session paper?
I don't think so.
I got it right here.
Well, Butch, it's about fishing time.
Going tomorrow.
Hey, my son went today and he caught one.
One?
Not very big, little, weighed about 2 pounds.
I'm going out tomorrow, see what I can do. It's early yet, but
Oh, yeah.
It's worth trying. You're not supposed to be around anybody anyway.
that's right.
That's right.
My father-in-law caught a couple pretty big bass. This well, yeah, would have been yesterday. He sent pictures. He wants to impress Nolan. Nolan's never impressed by him.
Mike says he's ready.
Are you ready?
Sure, whatever you say, boss. You're in charge.
The meeting of the Board of Ellis County Commissioners will now come to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Donna, could you call the roll?
Commissioner Dean Hazelhorst,
Present.
Commission Chair Butch Schleier,
Present.
Commissioner Destin Rock.
Present.
Have a quorum present.
Thank you. Any changes to the order of business, Darren? Okay.
Executive session.
One executive session. Yeah. Okay, prior minutes. Did you all get a chance to view the prior minutes? Any changes, corrections?
Looked at everything other than the one Donna just sent today, so I didn't get a chance to read that, but if you guys says it's good, I'm with you.
Yeah, it was verbatim on
Yeah.
that one. So
Okay.
Okay, minutes stand as submitted. Do I hear a motion for the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items A through G.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Issues from persons not on the order of business. And no one's there. Okay. Appraiser update. Lisa.
Good evening, Lisa Reed, County Appraiser. Thought I'd just give you a quick update this evening on what's going on in the appraiser's office. Real estate valuation notices were mailed to all real property owners on April 1st. If you remember, we had asked for an extension from the state to have those mailed. They're required to be mailed March 1st, but we did ask and receive a couple extensions, so we mailed them out on the 1st as we were expected to. Thought I'd give you some preliminary numbers on what has happened with the valuations this year. Overall, there was an increase in valuation of roughly 39 million, about 1.5% over last year. And that equates to an increase of 6.1 million in assessed valuation. Of those increases, about 20.8 million was new construction and remodeling, which is a decrease from 2019. And in the last 3 or 4 years, our area has seen a large increase in ag use, agricultural land values. We were told to expect that for another 1 to 2 years. However, this year, ag values in the county have remained roughly the same. We saw a decrease in the average land value for dry crop, but pasture land has gone up. Basically, it's been a wash. So as a summary, about 43% of the real property owners saw either a no change or a decrease in their valuation.
You said 43%?
43%. And then the remainder, 57% of the real property owners had an increase in valuation. The typical increase for homes was a little over 3%, and it turned out to be just about the same percentage for commercial as well. And the commercial, we had about $6 million worth of new construction and remodeling. That. And just to remind you that these numbers are preliminary. They won't be final. We've got to go through our appeal process, and then they'll be final when we certify June 1st, hopefully June 1st.
Mhm.
So, and I thought I would make the statement that these values, even though they went out April 1st, they are as of January 1st. And as we all know, things have changed in the last month or so. Oil values are, prices are down, it's affecting the economy. COVID-19 is affecting the economy. But values are of January 1st. The effect of those two current events, what they will have on the local market, will not be for this year. We will review that as the year goes, and that will be reflected in the 2021 values.
Okay.
Okay? Any quick questions?
Gentlemen, any questions, comments?
How much difference on oil are we gonna see for the county?
You can assume about a 50% loss in valuation. Everything I've tested so far, we're ways,
Any idea on dollar-wise what that'll be?
I think we were roughly 32 million assessed
I think so, you're right.
last year for 19.
Mhm.
So
Down
I'm
16.
projecting like 14 or 15 million assessed. So
Really? So income-wise, that's gonna be,
what do we figure,
wouldn't it be like,
$500,000
Yeah.
in tax revenue we might lose? Just the county's portion.
Mhm.
Of course, that's really too soon to know for sure yet. We're not halfway through yet trying to set those values. We, as I think I've let you know, that the oil price, the state did review the oil price that they set as of the first year. The high end was at $46 a barrel. They adjusted that, and the high end now is at $23 a barrel.
Mhm.
So, and we are required to have the oil valuations out to the oil operators May 1st. So,
Do you expect they'll change that again
No.
for Kansas? Okay.
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
A couple other things. On the real estate side, property owners have until May 1st to contact our office if they wish to appeal their value. We've had a couple calls already concerning the current events and how that's affecting their value, but, so I wanted to stress that it's as of January 1st. So other ways that the current events are affecting the appraiser's office. We have several deadlines coming up, and one is to notify personal property owners of their value. We have to do that on May 1st. As of today, we are on track to meet that deadline. The other deadline I just mentioned was oil valuations. We are to notify oil operators of their valuation May 1st. The last several years, we've asked for extensions for that, maybe a week. I'm anticipating we may need that a little extra time again. We have a little over 1,500 leases that we have to value. A lot of that is starting with data entry. Have to enter all their information, and then we go through and value them. And if they are requesting anything that's off the standard, then we have to review all those individually too. So, another thing that's going to be affected is our real estate appeals. We call them informal hearings this time of year. With the stay-at-home order, we are not going to be holding in-person hearings. We're going to be holding them all over the phone. If we need to do a physical inspection, interior inspection, we're going to hold off as long as possible.
Mhm.
Hopefully, when the things get back to somewhat normal, we'll be able to do those. we have to have all of those informal hearings completed by May 15th. So hopefully, we'll be able to do that.
Okay.
Another thing that's going to be affected is what we call our reinspection. We are required to physically inspect a sixth of the county every year. We typically start that process now in April, but with the stay-at-home order, even though we are exempt from that, I don't feel it's good public relations to be knocking on people's doors, asking about their interior, or walking around their house. So we're going to delay that process until a later time. The state has told the counties that they will be a little lax on some of our deadlines. We just have to ask for an extension. But our goal is to strive to continue to meet those deadlines as best as we can. Because if we don't meet them, then that affects other offices down the road. You know, if we can't make the June 1st certification of values to the clerk, that affects her abstract process and notifying taxing entities of potential values. So we're going to still strive to meet those deadlines. And another thing that's going to be affected is anytime there is a deed filed that involves monetary transaction, we are required to go out and physically measure that property. And again, with the stay-at-home order, I don't think that's good practice to be doing that. So we're required to do that measure, that inspection, 30 days after that transaction. So the state has given us a little leeway on that too. So we may have a bunch of work bombarding us at one time once this stay-at-home order is done. But that's basically it. I thought it was important enough to let you know that some of our operations may be stalled for a while. And at this time, we're all still working our regular hours, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
You have any questions for me?
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item is the election canvass. Donna?
Are you okay if I sit at my desk?
Sure.
Thank you. Donna Maskus, Ellis County Election Officer, County Clerk. We're getting to see lots of ballots, and I know that you've heard news stories that we do have several that the voter did not sign the ballot envelope. So we're doing every measure that we can to contact those voters, to come in and have them sign. We asked them to bring their own pen, and everybody's been very accommodating to that. So figures that I have here, there's been a few more added. 6,594, but I can tell you a lot of those were undelivered. Also ballots that came back. We had 1,256 ballots that came back undeliverable because you could not forward a ballot. That's per Kansas statute. So anyway, we're getting there. I'm sure we can receive ballots up until noon tomorrow. So if you do still have a ballot, I encourage you to vote. Do not forget to sign the ballot envelope and return it to our office no later than noon tomorrow, April the 7th. So,
Question for you.
yes.
If a ballot is returned before noon tomorrow but needs a signature, can you still get that signature after noon?
No. It's got to be ready at noon tomorrow, and if it's not completed, we have to go forward.
Okay.
Right. So, one thing I did want to visit with you, if all three of you are planning to participate, being a part of the canvass for the sales tax election, that'll be next Thursday, April the 16th at 5 p.m.
I plan to be.
Okay?
Yes.
Destin? Dean? Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you much.
Okay. Thank you, Donna. Okay, COVID-19 update. Jason?
Commissioners, Jason Kennedy, Ellis County Health Services Director. I actually come to you tonight with some fairly good news. I think the last time we did this was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. We still have no cases at this time in Ellis County residents, and we also have not been notified by any other health departments that we have close contacts of a positive COVID-19 patient in Ellis County that we would need to follow up with. We've continued to partner with kind of all the organizations involved with this. Everyone has been really good about working together. Most recently with the governor's executive order, we met with LEO, SO, Mr. Crease's office. Everybody kind of came together to make a plan for how we are going to enforce or move forward with that executive order. I really appreciate that cooperation that we've had between really the city and the county organizations there, and I think it's really impactful. At this time, with us in the situation we're in with no cases currently here, I think it's a great opportunity for us to continue to educate the public. The biggest thing that we're doing on the health department side now is continuing that and enforce that education. People need to abide by the executive order. They need to increase that social distancing piece. They need to continue to do that even though we don't have cases and haven't seen cases. The important part of that is that we want to try and limit that piece, that person-to-person spread piece. So if we can encourage people to do that, wash your hands, don't touch your face, follow all the KDHE and CDC requirements, and really just continue to educate themselves. We really do empathize and sympathize with all the people that have been impacted by COVID-19. Obviously, in our community, we haven't had direct impact from patients with it, but we've all been impacted in some way. Our lives have been changed by this, and so it's a balancing act of how we move forward with that. So I encourage everybody to reach out, kdheks.gov and then the cdc.gov. Really great information on there. And if you have questions specific for the health department, we actually encourage you to either access our Facebook page or our web page. And on there you'll find a link to its COVID-19 questions spelled out at ellisco.net. It's a great way to ask us questions. You're more than welcome to call, but the best way is to send us an email, and that way we can actually push out some of that information to you. We'll provide links to where we're getting our information from KDHE, CDC, and all that kind of stuff. So we encourage people to do that if you have questions. And if you guys got anything for me, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Are you getting a lot of phone calls, Jason?
Yeah, we are getting quite a few phone calls, and it seems to be, it's cyclic with whatever the latest thing is. So like right after the governor's executive order, we fielded a bunch of phone calls of situational things, and it truly is a fearful time. The public is understandably fearful, and they call us, and we do our best to provide them that information to hopefully help calm some of that down and answer their questions as best we can.
Okay, great.
Jason, how's your relationship been with Hayes Med Center and the back and forth between you guys to keep you updated? How's that gone?
Yeah, it's actually been really good. We've actually, from early on, really, we started having conversations with them, and they have been very welcoming and have done a great job of keeping us with the information we need, and we've reciprocated. So it's been a great working relationship. I'm really thankful for that. Actually, I honestly will say, the school districts, the Hayes Med, the law enforcement, SO, I mean, it's just really been a great opportunity for the community to come together, and it's kind of interesting how your priorities change. Things that maybe would have been a problem 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe aren't now, and everybody's focused and driven towards really the mission of how do we protect, how do we serve. How do we continue to push society forward and move forward in progress with all this stuff going on? So it's been a great relationship. Fort Hays State as well. Really, I mean, it's been good.
Okay.
Well, I think you've done a great job getting information out to the public and dispelling some of the myths that maybe have caused some of the fear around here and stuff like that. So I think you do a great job of being proactive and reactionary to some of the things that just seem to happen in modern society with social media and such. So, and I appreciate you being being able to get a hold of you so easily. So,
Great.
And I did give your number and Darren's number to a gentleman that maybe he's contacted you. He has a large supply of masks and gowns. Has he called you yet?
Yes.
He has called
Yeah.
you.
I've got to give him a call back, but that's my plan after I leave here. It sounds like he might have some resources for us, so.
So he has a large supply in, so I gave him your number and Darren's number, so.
Yep.
Okay,
I will get with him after this.
perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is the COVID-19 policy. Darren?
Good evening, Commissioners. Within your packet, we have a new policy to review. As the Commission is aware, I wasn't in much favor of suggesting that we change or update or create any new policies until we have a new administrator, but in light of the recent events and all the kind of the doom and gloom over the past 15 minutes you've been hearing, it kind of puts us in a point where we should have to do something in regards to taking care of an employees, kind of being a little bit more understanding, as well as a little bit more clear of how we're going to take care of them during this period, whatever that time period may be, another month, another 6 months. So we reviewed several other county policies with what they're doing around the state, because not what one county does or city does is going to work best for the others. Kind of lump them all together into what kind of works with our schedule and our current policies or personnel manual. And then we reviewed it at an executive team meeting last week and made some tweaks and changes to it, some clarifications, because each department is a little bit different as well. And with that came up to this final draft that is in your packet to review. And I don't know if you want to go through it at all, answer any questions, or explain how we got to where we got to, but however you'd like to address it.
I have a couple of items of concern that I would like to maybe see changed. And on page 7, top of the page, where you have under the first bullet, employees will not travel during the most current stay-at-home order. Well, employees are allowed to travel during the current stay-at-home order. People can travel. So I think it could be, we could put in there, it's recommended they don't.
We encourage them not to travel.
Encourage them not to travel. And just a couple of sentences below that, it says employees will not travel to any location listed on the KDHE travel guidance document, as well as any location with widespread or continued community spread. Sometimes an employee might have a very legitimate reason to go somewhere else, a very legitimate reason. So again, it should be recommended. I don't think we should forbid it. What that'll do is encourage employees to sneak off and go rather than report it. And also, because we don't have any cases yet, that's not to say tomorrow we won't, and we'll have widespread community involvement too with this issue. So we could be sitting in the same situation as an employee who might travel to another location. So I would just like to see that toned down a bit with not the will not, but maybe discouraged.
Okay.
I guess if they do travel to a location that is considered a hot area, I mean, if they come back from there, I mean, shouldn't they be tested, or shouldn't there, or if not that, shouldn't they have to stay home?
So, per KDHE requirements, there's the 5 states. I don't think that's been updated. Jason's probably got that memorized by now. Unless it's on the KDHE required document of what's being required to self-quarantine for that 14-day period. So, for instance, you run to Denver real quick and come back, you got to stay quarantined for 14 days. Now, if you go to Johnson County, Sedgwick, Leavenworth, any of those counties, they got widespread community transmission. However, KDHE isn't requiring those to be self-quarantine. It would be highly beneficial for those employees or for those individuals to come back and check their status, before they start going out and doing what limited community events they could go to. But there's no suggestions from KDHE, which we tried to incorporate within the document for those widespread community transmission areas.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd agree with Commissioner Schleier on, maybe lessening the language slightly on that, just because we want them to stay open. I agree you could run into issues where then they're hiding things and And if they have a legitimate reason to go, we want them to at least be open with us that when they get back, we don't want them to cause any community spread if they were to contract. So I think that makes it slightly less draconian and gets it maybe more in line with the end goal that we're going for with the policy.
So within that bullet, then just change it so instead of will not travel, that we're encouraging not to travel. Correct?
Okay, we addressing something?
Yeah,
on this?
yeah.
Sure.
So, I think we're dealing with two issues in here that we probably need to separate. In-state travel's never going to, I guess you can't say never, will likely not be included in a 14-day KDHE mandate because they realize that people cross state lines all the time to go to work, critical infrastructure, things like that. Now, the other question in there is to the states with widespread community transmission. We cannot knowingly allow employees to work if they have been to those states for the 14 days, and that is a KDHE mandate that is from the state. So I think separating those two pieces might be important, that we need to be very clear with employees that they travel to those states, they are on 14-day mandatory quarantine from KDHE. Now, in-state travel, what you guys want to do with that as an administrative task is outside of, what I'm willing to speak about. But I will say I think separating those two things is probably going to be important. And then also, I think if I remember right in the document, we did not put specific states in there because obviously it continually updates. So it's just whatever the KDHE mandate is at the time. Any other questions on that?
So this would be in line with the KDHE guidelines.
Yeah, the state travel piece is the in-state travel. There's nothing currently in the KDHE mandates regarding in-state travel. That would be that's an administrative decision at that point. Now, obviously, from the Public Health Office, we want to discourage all travel, and the governor's executive order lends itself to, if it's unnecessary travel, it is prohibited by the governor's executive order. Necessary travel and definition of necessary travel is that area is left up to really the individual in the governor's executive order.
Sure.
So there are two pieces there governing that.
Okay.
What you guys do with it as far as an administrative task is, that would be a legal discussion and an administrative function that I'm
Okay.
not.
It does on that, Commissioner Slyer does say if travel is required, gives a little leeway, but upon returning, the 14-day
Sure.
mandatory. So I guess if that is in line with KDHE policy, we should probably leave it as will not travel.
Yeah, we could leave it. There, like I
see
say,
what-
there just could be some employees who will say, well, I can't tell anyone if I go there.
Right.
Yeah.
I think when this is put out, I think we need to at least have the good open discussion with all staff about what would, constitute maybe a required traveling, and that we need to know those things so that we can get them on their mandatory 14-day quarantines.
We can share the KDHE quarantine list. If this
Okay.
policy gets approved, we can send that as an attachment to this. And then as well as if it ever changes, send it out every time it changes, so that way everybody knows, just in case there is a new area locally or Oklahoma or specific county.
And I
The
think
reason it kind of got in there is to the will not is because we've actually had some examples of county employees wanting to travel to some of these areas.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily how it impacts that one individual, but it's the other 10 people that individual works with now does not want to have to work with that individual. So now do you tell this one person they will not travel?
Right.
And it affects one, or you say, okay, we will allow you to travel, but then we got to tell the other 10 to, what are we going to do with the other 10? So the decision of one and telling them they can or can't travel impacts several others.
But sometimes travel can be legitimate.
Correct.
Yeah.
Even with the stay-at-home order, you could
Sure.
travel to Wichita, even though it's a widespread community transmission.
Sure.
I'm not going to say a specific reason off the top of my head. A funeral is an exempt thing, exempt under the stay-at-home order, so they could travel to Wichita for a funeral.
Okay.
Yeah, I think an email to at least the electeds and the staff, just so that they know that this is the purpose of it. I'm sure they all want to keep healthy and avoid this stuff as well, but I think as long as that's worded well so that they can understand what is and is not okay as far as our perspective for travel, and that we're going to require a 14-day quarantine afterwards, as will the state will require it, I guess, not us.
Okay. Another small issue on the next page, under alternate work schedules, we say telework from home or work from home will be allowed on an individual basis. Instead of will be, I think that just should be may be allowed. And I think it should be, if it is allowed, it should be with the approval of the IT department, because the IT department knows what kind of electronics is necessary for that, as well as putting a hole in their firewall and all of that. So they have to, I think, really have the final approval as if that should be okay.
And we've had that was one of our discussions, because Mike has been looking into that for several weeks now. We've had several discussions on it. And basically, if the department head will allow an individual to telework, they got to work with IT, because there's two parts to it. Is if he has the hardware to be able to supply it is one thing, as well as the other is if we have a whole bunch of people that is allowed, we don't have the hardware to do it, nor could we get it in a sufficient amount of time before this crisis may be over. And then on the back end of it, after it's over, these people don't have to telework anymore. Then we're going to have a whole bunch of hardware sitting on the shelf that's not being used.
Because we don't want to invest in a bunch of hardware.
Correct.
And nor do we want to compromise the security of the system either.
Yep.
So it should be Mike's final call on that, if a department should be allowed to do that.
Okay.
I'm okay with that slight change, yeah. Instead of will, maybe.
Yep.
So we can change that, telework may be allowed on an individual basis on the recommendation of the department head or elected official with approval from the Information Technology Department.
Yeah, with approval and in coordination with the IT
Yeah.
department.
Okay, and that's all I have on that policy. I think it's necessary, and it's a good policy to keep in place for the present time.
And we did look at it, as we talked about that pandemic pay, if we need to start separating staff, it's going to impact each department different. It's going to benefit some, however, some won't. For instance, as Lisa Ree, she's got deadlines she has to meet, and there's other departments that may be able to separate their shifts. So it's going to impact some better or more than others, as well as there was a cap on that, so that way we didn't allow this to go on forever. And Mr. Jeter's recommendation was to review this the first meeting in May, just to see where we're at, just to see if this policy needs to continue with the pandemic pace, so that way if we can rotate back to normal shifts, open the county doors back up and such,
Sure.
go back to full business, allow all employees to come back, we can say, hey, this pandemic pay is over. The extended FMLA with the Freedom or the Family First Care Act can that's all federally mandated, so that can all stay in place. But at that point, we can redetermine if we've hit our peak yet, if we're on the backside and starting the recovery mode. We can remove some of this policy and move forward without having split shifts or half the people working, half not.
Okay, sounds good.
The plan's the 1st of May to relook at the policy?
I believe it's May 4th is the first commission meeting.
First commission meeting, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, if we need a special meeting to get people back the way they need to, I imagine we're going to be looking at the 4th and maybe longer, but if we do, I'm happy to come in early if we need to get people
absolutely.
back to normal hours. So.
Do we need to have the amended version of this bill before we approve it?
Bill Jeter, County Councilor. We just really have some minute language changes, which I think the commission could go ahead and approve it based on those changes. And then Darren can just make those changes and get a revised policy out.
Okay.
Okay,
So it could be effective now.
sure. Okay, so we need a motion?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the Ellis County COVID-19 policy effective for April 6, 2020, with a review date of May 4th, 2020, as amended by the commission.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Okay, our next item, Sheriff's Office shift schedule. Scott?
Good evening, Commissioners. Scott Brown, Ellis County Under Sheriff. Sheriff Harbin couldn't make it, so he asked that I come and speak. It kind of ties in with just what you spoke about. We had been talking about this prior to our meeting the other day, the executive meeting. We just wanted to inform you that we are moving towards running 12-hour shifts within our department. I've been in contact with Mr. Jeter, and we have made sure it's legal within the guidelines of fair labor laws and such. So our guys are going to be running 84 hours in 2 weeks, allowing, we're basically going to have 3 AB shifts throughout there. It'll allow us to have guys off, so we're not cross-contaminating. As a cost to the county, the guys were gracious enough to understand the seriousness of it, and so those 84 hours, there will be no overtime in that. They're going to work right up to 84 hours. Anything above that, then they would be. We don't see any need to have that unless something really went awry. We're just trying to put some things in place because should the Hayes Police Department, Ellis Police Department, Victoria Police Department, they start becoming ill in that, we need to have things in place to step in and help out. Should this COVID-19 hit our county, people will become more fearful, and that's a fact. And so we're just trying to make sure we have law enforcement in place to ensure that we keep peace within and still keep our people safe and healthy so we can use them. This also affects not only the road, but our jail staff also. We're restricting people into our jail, meaning the sheriff and I are the only 2 with other jail staff to make sure we're not spreading that. We're doing temperature checks and those types of things and asking those questions that we need to. And also our office staff are rotating to make sure that we don't have all of our ladies in the front who actually run our department, keep us straight, that they're not ill. So those are things that we have put in place to ensure that we can work. We've set this schedule up for the next 6 weeks. Should things change and we don't need it, we can always change it back, but that's where we're at right now.
Okay.
So,
Scott, are you going to use the same hours in your jail too?
yes, we're going to run 12 hours. Theirs falls on an 8-week period because of the number of staff that they have, but yes, we're going to do the same thing.
Okay.
So, any questions?
No?
Sounds
like-
got a handle on it.
Sounds like a good
Seems like a
plan.
good exercise. And have you been in coordination with the other local sheriffs or local police departments as far as how this is going to work out for you?
Yeah, Chief Scheibler and I have spoken. They're running 12s right now. They're doing something similar. In regards to that, of course, we speak with Ellis Police Department on a regular basis as well as Victoria. So Highway Patrol we've also spoken with. So we speak at least a couple of times a week to make sure that we're all on the same page. We all have the same goal, and so we're all working together. And as Jason said earlier, we had a really good meeting and things worked out well, and we're all on the same page, and it's all about the same goal and objective.
Awesome. Thank you, Under Sheriff.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is Fairgrounds Building Rentals. Karen?
As the commission is aware, we've had to close down the operations out at the fairgrounds. That includes the rentals at the Shank and Underine buildings and anything out at the Speedway, unfortunately. But with that comes a couple different other problems. We are losing revenue from now until, however, the order stays in place until we can have mass gatherings out there again. What that does is it creates the loss of revenue, at least through the first part of May, just for the Shank and Underine buildings, of approximately just over $9,000 for those rentals. Every time there is a rental, the maintenance staff, Melinda Frost, they go out there, each time before they inspect, they walk through, they give out keys, and they work with whoever rents it, and then afterwards, they go out afterwards to make sure everything is cleaned up, then they actually clean up even more. But with that, they get a 20% commission of every rental. So their question to me, which I did not feel comfortable approving without visiting with the commission, was with those cancellations, as they're being forced by the state, are they without their commission as well? And I like I said, I couldn't give an answer, but I had told her I would bring it to the commission to see what your thoughts were.
I understand the question. I have a little bit difficulty trying to justify it. If the crew goes out there and cleans before and after and makes sure everything's in order, if the buildings aren't rented, they're not doing that. So what are we paying them for? Just so they continue to have revenue?
That's basically their thing, is just they were anticipating that roughly $1,600 in revenue over the next month, and now that since the cancellations were done not by the individual but by the state, that they asked if there's anything different that could be done so that way they wouldn't lose that revenue.
Commissioners, I'm going to recuse myself from a vote on this, as I'm an owner of a building that will be a competitor to our buildings at the fairground, but I won't recuse myself from discussion.
Oh,
I
sure.
just will recuse myself from any kind of voting.
I guess my thought is, I know, actually, they're still working out there on projects. Just from talking to Tom, they're still working on projects out there, I know. And I think don't they do all the mowing and maintenance on the outside too?
So not only do they get the commission from the rentals, but they are actually paid on a monthly basis to do all the maintenance and upkeep, and
But I know they're still working out there right now.
there is a line item for a budget for that, for those type of regular maintenance fees.
I know there's always updates they're doing out there, and I know they've been working out there. Tom and Linda.
Yeah, they're a big asset out there
Oh, yeah.
to take. Greg Herbert wouldn't have to worry about everything that's going on out there.
Care of all that out there. Heating, air, maintenance, you name it, they do it all. Even now that it's not open, they're still out there fixing. So,
So what's your thoughts, Dean?
what are we requesting, 1,600?
That's to May 1st, is that correct, Darren?
May the 9th.
May the 9th.
And that's all dependent on where the stay-at-home order is going to be, or the mass gatherings. If it goes for another month, that could jump from, instead of $8,300 in lost revenue, that could be $15,000, $20,000 in lost revenue. And then, so financially, it's not just that we'd be paying $1,600 out, but we're also losing $83,000. So that's a $10,000 swing within the budget. And if you do that another month, that could double.
I mean, I'd probably feel more comfortable with paying half of that, because I know they're still working out there. Projects and mowing and everything else, or even inside. I'd probably be comfortable with paying half of it, maybe not the full amount.
Commissioner, do you have any thoughts on it?
I would say that that's something that I'm just going to have to recuse myself of discussion with. It is tough on all of those businesses, I will tell you that. Luckily, we're not up and running and seeing the losses of this type of thing. But, I would say from my perspective, if I had staff, I would try my best to make sure that they weren't leaving me if I thought they were good staff during a tough time like this. So that's about the only discussion I think I could have with that.
Well, Dean, I could go along with your recommendation and maybe go halvesies on this.
I think half, just because I know they're still working out there, even though it's not open.
Okay.
So,
Then we'll see what happens in another month or two and
discuss it again.
and discuss it again if we need to.
So we'll just do, instead of half, we'll just do 10% instead of 20%.
Yeah.
Correct, so $880 or something.
Okay, then we have the 21 budget review. Darren.
This gets us back into financial figures again for 2021 budget. And the dates are in the agenda packet for everything that we've done throughout the first 3 months of the year and trying to put together the budget that the commissioners requested. Basically, to bring that into a nutshell, the commission asked for a 1% reduction with all the different departments that put everything together. The total county budget was actually about a 1.35% reduction. So the department heads went above and beyond what was asked in that sense. Some honestly were able to barely get 1%. Others were able to do a little bit more. But that's how we got to it. And I know the big question on the commission's mind is what the results are going to be tomorrow afternoon. But I know the staff has asked me that if there is something that needs to be done, or regardless of what the sales tax outcomes are, that they would like to know, so that way they have as much time to plan for them as possible.
Well, I think regardless of what the sales tax outcome is, we still need to look at being very conservative with our budget. We are going to lose a bunch of oil revenue, and that's just a given. So we have to be very cautious where we go here. Do we just want to go through these one at a time, or do you guys have comments about certain ones?
Yeah, I mean, I only have a comment about a few of them, but I guess we could go through, and looks like everybody got close to what we had asked. I guess first discussion I have is the thought process, like was just said. We're probably looking at a $500,000 reduction in our budget because of oil valuations. Seeing that, initially when we talked about a 1% reduction, that was the idea that we could get in line with a similar oil valuation. So now I feel like is a good time for us to exercise the reason why we pay an administrator, and that is to get a little bit more in the weeds with these budgets, go to elected officials and staff, and I feel like we need to try to get this budget down into the 21 million range. So at that point, we're looking at trying to find about $350,000 to $400,000 more dollars in the budget.
That's a lot of money.
Yep. And as long as Darren, as an interim, is okay with it, I think it'd be best if he spent a little time with staff and with the elected officials to see where they think they could find that. And then as we go through here, maybe we discuss maybe some issues we see that maybe have some room for budget increases or decreases as we go through. But that's just my initial thoughts.
Sure. I know, as I've mentioned to department heads on a couple of occasions, I wanted to see what budgeted, what's necessary for operations. So one of the things I'm looking at in here is travel expenses, registration fees, membership fees. If we get down to a crunch, we don't really have to be members to too many organizations. Same with registration fees. We don't have to go to a lot of seminars if we can't afford to go no more. I think those are just kind of things that are nice to do when everything's good. So that's something you could visit with department heads about too, looking at those memberships and travel expenses to make sure that they're just bottom lined. If they don't have to go somewhere, they shouldn't.
I know we've had some discussions on that. You know, each department is going to be a little bit different on the different out-of-town travel, webinars and such. For instance, elected officials, a new elected official may be required to go out to some different schooling, some different certifications and such that they would need. However, I think the commission would be see that those would be necessary, but those are going to be department specific on if they're needed or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Darren, especially new elected officials. I think a lot of that, as I came in, was highly beneficial to the job that I'm doing. But as far as long-term elected officials and long-term employees, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Commissioner Schleier. I think we need to look at cutting some of those expenses, the travel expenses, the registration expenses, the
Especially
hotels.
like the out-of-town ones, I mean, or out-of-state even. I mean, we need to look at that.
Sure.
And I think that the elected officials who would like to participate in these despite the budget. I think we allow them to on their own dime if they would like to do that. I think that's the best way to go, be a part of this and understand that they have buy-in in the process. So that's just my 2 cents
Sure.
on it.
Okay, well, we can just go through these one at a time. If you guys have anything jumps off the page at you.
I will also make a comment. I know the commission's probably aware of this, but when we get down to out-of-town travel, and it's going to be very minimal. I know you said the $21 million range, and that's roughly $400,000. I don't think even if we cut every single out-of-town travel, we're not anywhere close to 400,000.
Sure.
So I just wanted to make that statement.
Thank you, Darren.
Okay, on the first one here is the administrator budget. Anyone have any comments or questions?
No issues on that for me.
Okay, appraiser budget. Comments or questions?
None on that for me.
That one?
Attorney budget. Comments or questions?
I have a couple questions on this one, something that I think Tom needs to look at. In February last year, we had a packed room here discussing the need for funding for the county attorney. This represents a $71,242 decrease in employees. It's just something I definitely want to make sure that if Tom decides not to run again, as I believe he's decided not to, that the new county attorney isn't strapped with a budget that is lower than what we were being complained at last year in February. So I think if that elected official decides to come to us with savings, that should be their doing and maybe not savings from us budgeting them out from this budget session. Just my thoughts.
Commissioner Tom Drees, Ellis County Attorney, that was put in with an asterisk. That was based on your decision not to fund the two employees. I'm down one lawyer. I'm down one administrative assistant for that lawyer.
Okay.
So, that being the case, I submitted it to Darren saying because the commission has now twice refused to reinstate those positions for me, that would be the budget without those two positions. However, if at all possible, those positions need to be reinstated. And I won't go back through all the material. You've been through it before, but there are cases not being filed because I do not have attorney staff to file them. And that is reality. I'm doing what I can with what I've got. This budget to Darren reflects being without those two positions. That is not the best thing for my office. The best thing for my office would be to reinstate those two positions. But since twice you voted not to, I told Darren that that money could go back if you're not going to reinstate those positions. If you are, then the money needs to come back to the department. Okay. But that's a decision you probably can't make unless and until you see what happens with the vote.
Right.
On the tax.
I just think it's important for us as a commission to understand that 71,000 of our budget is from a decrease in those positions. So
Yeah, absolutely.
as we go forward, now the 392 becomes more than that. So thanks, Tom. Thanks. And I had no idea on the asterisks or any of that discussion. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. The reality for my department is if you're going to want any further cuts, you're talking about laying off staff.
Staff, okay.
I'm 96% salary.
Okay.
And the fixed costs I have are fixed, and I can't change those. The only place we can cut is staff.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And just to help clarify that too, so you don't get stuck with that $71,000, that's not the total for two of those full-time positions. I can't remember how much we'd have to add back into that.
Yeah, because that's just salaries. It's not benefits, right?
Well, that was
That was a half-time.
that was one position, the administrative assistant, and I had a half attorney.
Okay.
But I can't hire half an attorney. So because I can't hire the attorney, I couldn't justify keeping the administrative assistant without the attorney. That's why those were given back to Darren.
Okay.
But if I can hire the attorney, I need the administrative assistant with it.
Sure.
And so, together to hire those two, salary-wise, you're talking about probably 95 to 100,000 in salary, and then the benefit packages that go with them. So you're probably talking about another 30,000
Pretty easily,
in
just
benefits.
depends on the
So
health insurance.
that's what you would need to replace those two positions. But since you're not in a position to do it now, that's why that money was offered back to Darren.
Okay,
Great. Thank
Okay.
you, Tom.
thank you, Tom. Okay, buildings and grounds.
Would the commission like, if, do you want to leave them both out for now?
Yeah, I think
And
so.
then if the one or both pass, would you like us to prepare the budget the next round with them in it? Or is
Might
it,
depend a lot where, how this vote goes.
Yeah, the hard thing I think with an attorney's budget is how they'll run their office and whether it may be completely different. That was more of my position on this, is I want that attorney to be able to be the person that returns the money to the county as opposed to us budget them out that. But you know, that was my thought process in the discussion. I think that we should at least see what the numbers look like if we do add those positions and how much it affects that budget in total.
I think the best, the easiest, or not the easiest, but what we should do is if one or the other pass, I think your next budget proposal should have it with both positions back in it. So that way you see, and that the option is there.
Yeah.
However, we know what it's going to be if they're not.
We'll at least get a look at it that way.
Perfect.
Okay, buildings and grounds.
No issues there for us.
I have a question for you, Darren. Under service agreements on buildings and grounds, there was no activity for 3 years, and now there's budgeted for $23,600. What's the
Under
deal there?
1248.
Yes,
So in the previous years, we had 3 employees in building and grounds.
okay,
And then as of this year, that employee is no longer with us. And we looked at what the cost ratio would be as to having that employee with all their costs. And then contracting that out. And it was cheaper to have a contract service to help clean. So that's why this line item in here was added for the contracting and cleaning services for the EMS, the health department, and the courthouse.
okay, makes sense.
So it was,
Kind of remember that going through.
and I didn't check, but I believe it was roughly half the price of what we were paying that other employee. That's why that line item is now sticking out.
Okay,
Very good.
county clerk budget.
No issues on mine.
No issues. County commission budget.
Just another note, this is not funding Northwest Planning. This is how we got to this budget number, correct?
Correct.
That's just something I think we should keep in mind.
Sure.
Yep.
We have communication center.
No issues on mine.
Nothing either.
Okay, contingency and transfers. Put that over here. Coroner's budget.
The contingency and transfers, I might add, so just looking at a $36,000 decrease in our subsidy, which means we would need to find about $36,000 in decreases in outside funding.
For subsidies?
Yep. So that, I think that's something we should keep in mind as we start looking at outside agency funding. And I think Darren gave us outside agency funding list again. So,
Yeah, I think that's 891,000.
yep, the way that's budgeted, we would need to find 36,000 more dollars in decreases in that.
Okay.
And where I got that number, just so the commission knows, is not that I was suggesting it. I was just keeping it straight across the board, 1%.
To get to the
Mhm.
1%.
To keep Department 97 at 1% below, that's what the outside agencies would have to be cut by, was that $36,000-ish?
So at least another mental note as we look forward.
Coroner's budget, probably can't do a lot about that one.
Yeah, I discussed with Darren who did this budget, and Darren's like, pretty much me, but it's not really something we control, so.
I did visit with Dr. Nordhook, and a lot of this is dependent, you can't control who dies.
Sure.
Who has to be exhumed, who has to have autopsies, where those autopsies are at, how much they cost, they're all different. And Donna can attest to that when we get the bills.
Okay,
Courthouse,
no issues from mine. Once again, tough one to control.
Yeah.
That is one of the budgets that went up, as we discussed with the insurance premiums a couple of weeks ago, I did account for that projected increase of what they're thinking, but they haven't released those numbers yet.
And any idea on how that budget is looking this year with everything going on
For the,
for the courthouse and the courts? Courts is next. Do you
Amanda's
wanna
gonna,
address this?
Amanda's gonna,
This is just the courts, that is, our
Okay.
insurance is paid through the state.
Okay,
the courthouse budget, it doesn't actually do with Amanda's office at all. This is basically 95% of this is just what we pay in insurance premiums to
Right.
our K-Camp.
gotcha.
okay, and the court's budget? Any issues with the courts?
it's kind of out of our control.
Again,
Somewhat,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
If Amanda quits putting people away, it'd go down, but she seems to have that fetish, I don't know.
The election budget,
It's kind of out of our control too.
No issues.
emergency management. No issues with that one.
I didn't have any issues.
EMS service,
The only question I had on that was we had dropped salaries quite a bit. I wondered if this had something to do with Jason's taking over of a couple of different roles. I imagine that's it, but maybe he can allude on that a little better.
Good evening, Jason Kennedy, Health Services Director again. Yeah, in the in the EMS budget last year, you guys had approved a half of a assistant director position basically to be added back in this year. So the budget numbers that we have reflect actually removing that position completely for the remainder of this year. I don't feel that it's prudent right now. Not that, especially right now with what we're currently going through, that it wouldn't be nice to have somebody to run EMS, but it's with the economic time that we're in and with the changes the county's going to have to undertake, I just didn't feel like it would be a good time to try to even hire somebody partway through the year not knowing what next year looks like. And that position had been predicated off of some grant funds that we had received the year before that the commission was gracious enough to set back. But I just don't feel that it's a good time to bring someone into that. So the bulk of that had been removing that basically finishing off the assistant director position for the remainder of this year.
okay.
Very good. That's what I figured. Thank you, Jason.
Okay.
The environmental budget. Had no issues with that?
No issues.
I had no issues.
I will state on that, just in case there are any questions, that's one of the departments that are very heavy on employees. As you can see, they did not meet that 1%. If we would have cut 1% out of that department, outside the employees, it actually would have been like a 37% cut in their contractual and commodities line items. So in working with the Public Works Director, they removed that same amount that would have been needed out of Public Works and transferred it over to environmental. So that money is still being reduced. It's just not in this department. It was actually in Road and Bridge.
Okay.
Bill trying to keep staff on there, I imagine. That's
Okay, fair and building rentals.
Kind of out of our control again.
yeah. The only question I had, it looks like we did a little bit of an accounting change here, Darren. The big drop on utilities, it's shared now with the fair board.
So I could actually spend a lot of time on this. I'll briefly go through it.
Okay.
I've met with Tom and Melinda Frost and the Fair Board. I've met with Donna because they take care of a lot of the bills with the clerk's office. And we're actually looking at what's getting billed to which of these two departments, because I believe on the next page, there's two different departments. You have one that
The big
is
bump on fair.
supposed to be just for the Shank and the Unryan rental. So it's almost like its own little business. You have revenue and you have expenditures, and then you have the fair budget. And bills were getting crossed between the two, and so we separated them out. If you see one is an increase from the previous year, the other one has a large decrease. If you add the two together, both departments, it's still a 1% decrease. However, we went through all the bills and separated them out to what they're actually, hopefully, should be for the two, with the way they're supposed to be billed. One of the things that I don't think it's going to work out, but we're getting the energy bills. If you look at the energy bills out there, are outrageous. And I've spoken to several different people out at Midwest Energy to see if we can work on this. I don't think there's much we're gonna be able to do. Basically, you can say an average month we're paying about $300 in actual energy usage, but they have a demand charge, and they base that demand charge on your peak month, about 80% of what that demand charge is. So even though we're spending about $200 to $300 in electricity, we're having a demand charge of $1,500 to $1,800 a month for the other 11 months that we're not using it. And that's not just for us, that's all commercial users that have that demand fee. So we're very unique, and there's really nothing that they can do outside of that. However, I'm working with an electrician to see if we can do some different things out there by not having multiple meters, put everything on one meter, and then split everything out, so that way we're not having 3 demand charges on 3 different meters. That didn't really look like it's working out, as well as how it would work out. Each different building has different voltage running to them, so you'd have different transformers. It's on a primary line, so I think our options on trying to save, I was hoping that we'd be able to have a pretty good savings out there for the energy, but I keep striking out every time I think I have a good idea to change it. But
It's essentially to have the amount of service that we have to cover the time that we're running the county fair, correct?
correct.
Okay.
We have one for the Shank and the Unryan, which is real big, and then the month of, I think it's August, but it's actually for the month of July. You can see that energy bill for that month is 3 to 4 times higher than every other month, except for the rodeo arena and RPM Speedway lights, because they have races basically from March to October. Those peak up a little bit more, but
So one thing that comes to mind on that, it sounds like we have a peak month that really affects our total budget, is the possibility, once again, kind of leads into the idea of grant writing, but since our peak month is a very hot month in the summer and we're running air conditioners like crazy, some sort of investment in an energy source that would help stem that month from being so high might be something down the road, and that would be the type of thing that a grant writer in our county could really look into in order to make it affordable enough to start and then save us in perpetuity down the road. So usually you talk about hot months in the summer, that's solar energy of some type.
I know Mike has looked into solar. Our IT director has had some ideas, and that may be an option for the future. There's going to be initial investment to get something going, but the savings in the years after would come back.
Very good. Okay.
Okay. So we went through the fairs. The fire budget, fire department. No issues there?
No issue.
We'll speak to that just because it's outside the general fund.
It's your baby.
Oh, well, yeah, that too. But if you do look at it, it is an increase from the previous year. But what I've tried to done, and Phil and I had talked about this last year, is our general fund has a budget stabilization account, which is a certain percentage, and it's roughly $715,000 a year that's in there that's not budgeted for. It's just to help overages as well as build that unencumbered balance. The fire district has never had that. So using those same percentages as the general fund, I still reduced the budget by 1%, but I added that same, what that $750,000 is to the $21 million budget, that same percentage came out to about $20,000 of a budget stabilization account. So that way it helps next year, the fire budget actually will be impacted more than the general budget because of the oil and gas valuations for that district are different than the general fund budget.
Okay.
So that having that unencumbered balance will help fluctuate those fluctuations in years.
That makes sense. Thank you, Darren.
Okay, Health Department. Have any issues with that?
I didn't.
No issues there.
Okay.
Just an increase in the drugs. I'd imagine that's something that we have to, I think that was the big hit on it.
Jason Kennedy, Health Services Director again. So on the Health Department budget, we, as you can see, we've had a significant increase, almost a 5% increase in the budgeted amount. And the bulk of that, actually, if you'll see, I actually cut 2.25 times more than what I needed to for the 1% reduction out of the general budget. I removed everything. You talk about travel, I removed everything out of the budget. I'm not sure that we can even meet that number, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
But, you know, and we do have mandatory travel. For some of our grants, we have to go to meetings, whether we like it or not. We have, so I'm not 100% sure we can meet that number, but one of our primary missions is vaccinations. And with the cost of vaccines, it's not even a one for one, dollar in, dollar out. We make money on vaccines.
Right.
And as you can see, we actually increased our revenue last year. The number on here is 134,000. That is not actually the correct number for just that year. We had some overflow billing. There were some issues with billing at the beginning of last year. So some of those funds you actually see coming in out of actually the 2018 budget into the 2019 budget. But we did increase revenue by around $80,000 last year. A lot of that comes from the additional $35,000 that we spent in vaccines.
Yeah.
We make money off that stuff. And so to meet these budget numbers and not see that increase of $22,000, we have to leave revenue on the table. That's the only way to do that. So that's kind of a conversation that I'm willing to, we're willing to have if we need to, but that's it. That's the next step. So.
Yep, I think that's important. It's cost of goods sold. It's a product that we have that we actually make money on, so.
And I will tell you guys, we are looking at a couple of options specifically dealing with the vaccines. We are looking into some programs that might help us with that. We have partnered with everybody we can partner with. We're on every buy group that you can be. Like, we have done everything we can to drive that cost down. It's just an increase. And there's, it's, I think they figure a 4% increase across the board for vaccines and meds every year. And so that's just something that we have to deal with.
With the coronavirus issue this year and vaccination, hopefully next year, do you imagine this could all change again, right?
I honestly have no idea what that looks like. I would assume the flu vaccine is going to be very important again. Not that it hasn't been, but I do think that we've seen the numbers slide from year to year. Obviously, I'm 2.5 months into this, so I don't have that data off the top of my head. But I think we're going to see a huge increase in people willingly accepting the flu vaccine. There's some new vaccines on the market that are fairly costly, but they are really impactful and do a great job, especially for the at-risk population, which is extremely important right now. So there's a lot of exciting stuff there. It's just, it costs money, and it's, like I said, we make money on vaccines. We don't waste any vaccines. At the end of the year, any vaccines that don't get used, we sell back for full credit. So we don't lose a penny on vaccines. We make money on them.
Sounds good.
I think something to keep in mind from my perspective, I think of the at-risk population and the discussions we've had in the past too with the retirement community, specifically in Ellis County, and the economic impact they have on us.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, IT Department. No problems?
Just the equipment, budgeted and costs and stuff, do you think that is a doable number, this $9,000 equipment, computer equipment and parts? It looks like we've been over that on occasion, but I imagine you have a schedule of things you need to buy.
Good evening, Mike Leiker, Ellis County IT Director. We have been scaling back on purchasing equipment. What that equipment expense line item is for refurbishing and upgrading current hardware, so like hard drives and RAM mostly. So and then monitors and other incidental items that wear out. our PC replacements are on a replacement schedule that is part of the capital improvement budget, and that's a whole other issue, so.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, let's see, 911 budget.
No issues there for me.
No issues.
Is there? I have noxious weed budget next. All look pretty good.
Yep, I think chemical prices might even be down. By the way they look, chemical prices have been going down, so that might affect that budget even more. They've dropped quite a bit, like Roundup and 2,4-D, Banville, that's all came down a lot in the past about 20 to 30 days. It's dropped a lot.
Okay.
So that might actually affect their budget.
Okay.
That might be a positive.
Public Works budget. Any problems?
No.
I will say I did have a good discussion with Bill on Public Works and essentially in the pricing. He gave me a good synopsis of how we buy fuel out there for consumption. And so it was something that I had in my mind that, especially as low as things have been now, that we were on top of it as a county in terms of locking in prices as much as we could. And he's assured me that they do what they can with the amount of storage capacity they have to keep the prices as low as they are. But it's the market is so it's just not something that you can get contracted out very far in those markets, diesel and gasoline. So
Sure, absolutely. Okay, Register of Deeds budget. Any issues there?
I had none.
none here. Just wish the state would give us some of our money back.
Exactly.
Okay, and then we have the, this looks like, what is it, revenues? No department.
Oh, yeah, revenue schedule, yep.
Okay, sheriff budget. Any
No
issues?
issues.
Okay,
No issues. I think this is a budget that is highly complex, obviously, and this is one that I think that, you know, this is the type of thing I think Darren can get in the weeds and maybe see if there are some savings there. Although with everything going on right now, we just had a discussion of how tough that is with them. So lessening service there is never something that I want to think about, but it is something that might be in the cards. So.
okay, solid waste budget. Any issues with that one?
None.
No issues.
Okay, treasurer budget. Do we have issues with this one?
You know, we did hire an extra position. I know she was down 2 and she hired one back. Then she did hire another one after we kind of made the recommendation of not hiring.
She,
And I know she is an elected official and has that authority.
she did go 6 months without that position.
Was it that long?
I believe so, from September to February, I believe.
Roughly, so,
Yeah.
maybe March.
Mm-hmm.
Was it? No, I didn't know how long it was exactly.
Do we want to leave that position in the budget?
Do we have any idea of what kind of overtime we looked at while that position was vacant?
Yes, I believe one of the commissioners asked, and I think it was maybe 11 hours over that entire period of overtime.
So I think we should
Maybe
probably
it was 71 hours. It wasn't a
look
whole
at
bunch.
that position harder.
Okay,
You know, I think this is a budget that we definitely want her to look at some of the travel, subsistence and stuff like that. As much as she can, I imagine those are things that jump out to me a little bit.
and one line item in here I would just like to see eliminated completely is employee incentives. It's $1,500. That line item doesn't appear in anyone else's budget.
Yeah, I saw that. And in defense, it never really was above $100, so I had the idea of getting it down to $100, but I agree with you. I did have that as a note to get it down at least reasonable, but I am not unopposed to the idea of eliminating it completely.
I would like to see it eliminated.
I will say our employee recognition policy, I did not bring it down here with us, but I believe that policy states that a department head or elected official can expend up to $500 annually for different employee incentives. That's outside what we give for like the 5-year anniversaries and such. This is for if your employees do something well, or if Donna's employees are working ballots late, she can order them a meal to say thank you for your hard work. And so that is within policy for $500 annually.
It's not in anyone else's budget,
Yeah, that's
so let's eliminate that line item. And then we'll definitely want to look at the subsistence there, the
Yep.
rental cars and planes, as well as registration fees. And then we'll have to give consideration to that staff issue.
The other one I would like to see looked at is advertising, just in the sense of need and how much is done with that and what is done with it. It's a sizable budget, and I know that is important to treasury operation, but I'd like that one looked at closely as well.
Okay.
just
Anything, Dean?
That's it. I think you kind of covered it.
Okay.
to make sure I got these so I can communicate with her, since kind of rental cars, subsistence, registration fees, employee incentives, some explanation for printing and binding, or
No advertising.
just advertising.
Yeah, it looks like printing and binding went down quite a bit. It looks like that's a lot of the find in the budget, so.
What exactly is that subsistence? What is that all in? That's all in there?
Food.
Food
Each
motels?
department's a little bit different, but just because we looked at it, it's hotel rooms. It's basically hotel rooms and food. There may be some registration fees for like going to a class. Your registration fee for that may be in there. I'd have to look. I'd have to pull it up to see what all she
There is
charges.
a line
in there.
item for registration fees, too. So,
Okay,
okay.
that's
So,
fine.
yeah, those will all be considered.
Yeah.
As well as the one position. That was the only thing. Okay.
The last position filled. Okay. Yes?
Bill Ring, Director of Public Works. Good evening. Wanted to tell you one thing, the good news, today's the first time in probably a year I have 51 people. I have a full staff, so thank you. We have a full team of mechanics, truck drivers, et cetera, so it was kind of a nice way to start the day.
Sure.
I would just like to ask a question, and I do not disagree at all, Butch, with the travel. And I bring this up because it just so happens that I registered for the KAC conference last week. I just put the hotel reservation in. Would you prefer that we just stop traveling now and have a little more cash carry? We're not going to travel next year. I mean, I don't want to expend, for Kurt and I normally go to that meeting, and so it's normally,
Bill, I want you to go what you think is necessary. That's what I would prefer, and I can't make that judgment for you. That's up to you.
Oh, I understand. I just, we're going to,
Are these in-state or out-state? What you're
the KAC is the KAC conference.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's,
that's in-state.
I understand, but it's $150 a night room this year or something. I mean, whatever, that's the convention rate. So, I mean, 3 nights, there's $450. I take Kurt, that's $900. There's a registration fee. You've got some food. If you would prefer that, I have no issue with that. I mean, we don't travel a lot out there. Most of our meetings we go to are usually down and back same day. I mean, if I send guys to a training or something, I might have an hour overtime because I have to travel to Salina. But we really do not have a lot of, overnight and things like that. I mean, I've never had a plane ticket, that type of thing. But I mean, if you want to have more cash carryover, at least to start it, I'd like to know now. I'll cancel those reservations. I mean, no harm, no foul. But if not, I mean, I've got budget money for this year. I don't next year. It doesn't matter. I just want to kind of get some guidance.
You know, as a commission, I think we're just sending two this year, aren't we? Isn't that what we decided? Them two are going, and I'm gonna pay my own way, I think.
I don't know.
Well, I'm not planning to go this year.
I think you're on the list as a chair. You're the delegate.
I might be the delegate, but I'm not planning to go.
That'd make Dustin, that'd make Dustin the,
Make me the proxy for you.
and I'm gonna go, but I'm gonna pay my own way.
Bill, I would say the benefit that you get from KAC, I know that we have the convention part of it where you learn about products, things like that.
Oh, exactly.
Think about that in the long term of, will it be more cost benefit for you to go to learn about these things and save the county money and make our roads safer, or is the cost not worth it? And I'd imagine these companies are getting a lot better at coming to you with those type of things than they have in the past, per se, with modern technology.
And again, I don't want this to sound, I'm not trying to be disparaging, but if our budgets are going to get cut, I can't buy anything being down there. I mean, we have our set people that we
Right.
deal with now for equipment, supplies, asphalt, we bid things out.
Right.
New product information, is that worth spending the kind of money, to go to that? I just, I'd say, I'm looking for guidance for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I would just have to, I know I sat in on a class with you about road closure, things like that. That's really important. So I can see the benefit of
Oh, the
KAC.
legal aspects are wonderful, but
Yeah.
again, is it the
Yeah.
value of dollars spent versus,
Right.
Sure.
I think, yeah, if you weigh that on your mind, you let us know what
okay,
you're thinking.
well, that's fine. I just figured, but if that's the case, I
And I
said,
think that's something we can discuss possibly next week or the week after also.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, you weigh on it, maybe we weigh on it a little too. Okay.
I will
Okay.
add too, just because since Bill brought up KAC, is Ellis County is in charge of Little KAC next year in April.
Okay.
It's our once in 18-year turn to host, so.
So with that, I think Bill and Kurt need to go because they're gonna be helping with that also going forward.
We,
The KC in Wichita is not directly related to KC, the
No,
little
but
KC.
you're gonna be there helping with little KAC.
Donetta will be helping.
Yeah.
We've worked. She did such a good job for you with the KCHA meeting. I've got her lined out to,
And I told her I'd help her too if need be,
Right.
so
okay.
we're all good.
Very good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. County Administrator report.
I do have a couple things. Let's give a commission a quick update on the different projects that are going on at the courthouse. The restrooms have started, and I think Amanda left because I was going to ask her how it was going, but it's probably going about as best as it can with not having a lot of traffic in there.
We've got 2 done and 4 of them are in progress.
And
Oh, very
So
good.
they've kind of, well, yeah, I guess they would know just as much as Amanda, but they're making good progress. I think the first floor is completely done. Almost all of the water fountains are plumbed and ready to go. So they're staying on top of that. The elevator is a different issue. It is currently, we think we've got all the parts now. However, they're all stored in eastern Kansas City, and commercial builders is wanting paid for their equipment. However, we have told the contractor to hold off because it's a 4 to 6 week project, and they would be traveling to and from some of these areas of concern. And the sheriff thought it was best just to keep them out of our community for the time being. However, the contractor is going to ship the parts here, and then once the parts are here, we will pay commercial builders for the parts once they're in our possession, but not the labor, so that way we hold them to their word of getting back out here as soon as they can to complete that project. As well as something the commission is may not fully aware is we're replacing the batteries for all the backup electricity for the dispatch center. We received those. However, we told that contractor to also wait to send out any of their employees to do that because of their locations of interest as well. The EFIS project is done, and so that project is done and came in under budget. So,
Very good.
and the only other thing to add is over the weekend we received, I'd like to say, a couple $100,000 worth of medical personal protective equipment from the Strategic National Stockpile. The National Guard delivered it early Sunday morning. We got it all separated yesterday and distributed today through, I don't know how many different agencies, from the First Care Clinic to the Health Department, EMS, all the police, fire departments in the county, Hayes Med, some personal physicians. So we got, like I say, it has been hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment we distributed. We were able to meet those basic needs for our community, and we still have some in reserves that we're keeping on our shelves, not necessarily to not give them out, but so that way when the next person runs out, we don't have to beg and borrow from one another. We can continue to restock their needs. So that was a good addition over the weekend that we got.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
with that, that's all I got.
Okay, County Commission reports. Dean?
Not a whole lot going on. I did participate in a meeting yesterday with Bill Ring and Jason Kennedy, and I think there was a total of 21 of us, I believe, with how many? There was 30 on there? Oh, I guess there was 30 of us participating in a call with Senator Jerry Moran. And he was just concerned of how everything's going in Ellis County. Actually, I think Margaret Allen was even on there with you, and you listening in on that too, yes. And just heard from myself, from the city, from Bill. Jason gave a nice update. Just kind of went around the room. We had all sorts of bankers on there. I think 2 bankers. We had Dick Worth. We just had 2 city commissioners, I guess the mayor and 1 city commissioner. So it was just a very good meeting. Lasted, I think, for an hour and a half, if I'm not mistaken. It was quite a while, but Jerry just kind of went around did the whole Zoom thing. So it just went around the room asking questions, and everybody kind of gave an update. And Jerry's very concerned of what's going on out in this area. And so it was very good. I guess you were on it too, weren't you, Darren? No, you were not.
I was supposed to be, but I
That's right, you were not, yeah. So, no, it was, Jerry's very concerned and willing to do anything he can to help us out.
Sounds
out
good.
here. So he really just wanted to know what was going on in Ellis County and what he could do to help. So he was very interested in the oil, the farming side, mental health side. Walt Hill was on there, gave a nice presentation. So it was very, very interesting. Hour and a half. It really went by quick. So thank you all that participated, especially our county employees. So
Okay.
thank you.
Commissioner Ross?
The last week or so, I've participated in a couple different radio interviews, one as a small business owner, one as a county commissioner, or 2 as a county commissioner. Although it's hard for me to get those separated when I'm talking to somebody, but I will put out there that all the small businesses that are suffering right now, I can't imagine being in the food industry anyway, because it's such a tough industry to be in, but in times like this, I can't even imagine the things they're going through. So I'll just reiterate a few things that I talked about in the interviews I gave, and it's related to the stimulus package and small business loans. If you're a small business, if you own a small business, you need to be looking at these economic disaster injury loans. They're a long-term 30-year loan, 3.75% fixed interest, 6 months of operating capital to help get you through this, and possibly if you employ quite a few people, the payment protection plan. The payment protection plan, if you keep all your employees on through all of this, ends up turning into a grant, and I believe the grant is up to $10 million in payroll. So even big, what I would consider to be big businesses qualify for this. All you need to do on that one is get in contact with a bank that works with the SBA, which is nearly every bank in Hayes and the surrounding area. So that's something to look into. The EIDLs are directly through the SBA, and I think a potential to get $10,000 put into your bank account to get you through the initial issues here, the couple weeks of shutdown, but also then some operating capital to get you back on your feet. Hopefully we can push the go button on this economy sooner rather than later. But those were the things I discussed, as well as the small things to almost everybody else, which are really big things to me, and that is keeping my businesses afloat and trying to get myself through this. So that's all from me.
Okay.
And Jerry did push that a lot yesterday. SBA loans, encouraged people to do it, and Randy Walker was online, and Randy has, I don't remember how many million exactly they processed already. Do you remember, Bill or Jason? Was it like, no? 30?
They were working Sunday.
I know. I want to say, was it 30 maybe?
It was a lot.
It was like 30 million, I think possibly they've already processed.
And those, I believe, are payment protection plan.
But he encouraged whether you have one employee or 100 employees to go through that SBA process. Jerry really pushed that yesterday also, so it was very interesting, so.
Yep.
Okay, and I have no report.
Okay.
Okay, I think we have an executive session.
I move that the Board of County Commissioners recess into executive session under the following exception to the Kansas Open Meetings Act pursuant to the non-elected personnel matter exception. The subject to be discussed during executive session is employee personnel matter for 15 minutes. Those two include the Board of County Commissioners, 3 commissioners, Bill Jeter, and Interim Director Darren Myers.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Ready to rock?
good. Well, good luck with it.
Okay, no action is taken, and meeting is adjourned at 6:54.
Thank you, Butch.
You all?